So a lot of people are familiar with risk, which is a method of learning. And the reason why it's famous is because it's seen as a reductionist way of focusing on like 5 different questions rather than 100,000 questions. So, for example, when you're learning a particular Gemara, you could focus on the question of Chefsa or Gavra. So, for example, when we're learning about the Isser of possessing Chametz, the question will become reduced to whether the violation is a violation in the chefsa, the object, meaning that the chametz itself becomes forbidden in and of itself, or is the chametz aser in relationship to the gabra, it's subjective to me. And you're going to see all of these different ways of looking at it in the Gemara. Different Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim argue about what's the nature of the word tashbisu, of destroying the chametz. Rabbi Yehuda says you have to burn it. We learned it out from a verse that would equate it with nosar, some other thing that needs to be burned, which would indicate that must be that it's iser chepsa, that the object of the chametz becomes forbidden to the point where it has to be really destroyed. The rabbis would say, no, you can't have it, you can't benefit from it, but it's not in relationship to the object itself. The object itself is fine, and the same debate could be read into another, that the same discussion about Chafs and Gavra could be read into another conversation about what happens if Chametz was around on Pesach. Wasn't your Chametz. You put it on the street, for example. Nobody knows this. Only people are sitting and learning. There's one opinion in the Gemara that even if it was not even owned on Pesach, once Pesach happens, the chametz can never be eaten by a Jew. That would be the epitome of an Isser Chapsa, that the object becomes like a piece of ham. The only difference is the Isur on Pesach is even more severe. It's a Chiyuv Karos. So that, again, you see the brilliance of Brisk is you take one Chakira and you can apply that one question into all of these different cases. I could go on. Maybe I will. Howard, should I go on or? So here's the question. As appealing as this Brisker Derech is, what are some of the antecedents and the alternatives to this kind of methodology? And the answer, to some extent, is Lomdus. Lomdus is a vague, meaningless word. You could fill it. Lomdus is kind of it means a deep type of learning. That's what it really means. What the details of how you define Lomdus are, that's up to the Rishon you're exploring, the Achron, or whoever it is that you're looking at. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to take 2 great rabbis today, and for some of you, introduce them to you, and for others of you, you know of them. You've learned a guy like David. You probably spent a few years learning the Raan and Yeshiva. Okay, so you remember the Raan, but I want to reintroduce him to you. Okay, so yeah, that's fine. Okay. So the Raan is this amazing pirush on the Gemara. One of the great things about the Raan is it's not a pirush on the Gemara, it's a pirush on the Rif. The Rif is one of the 3 major halachic sources that the Shulchan Aruch is based on. The Rif, who was the student of the Rimigash, who was the teacher of the Rambam's father. So the Rif and the Rambam often go together. They often part in some subtle and not so subtle ways. That's already another exploration of the best way to understand the Rambam, there's a whole thing about brisk. That would be the one way of saying that the best way to reconcile what the Rambam is talking about when he contradicts the Gemara, let's say, would be to have a brisker derech to answer what the Rambam is talking about versus what the Gemara is talking about. Another way, I don't want to call it a historical way, is simply to read the Rif before you read the Rambam. Now, how would you know which Rif to read? You'd have to be a genius, because the Rambam is not ordered according to the Gemara, so you'd have to do a lot of research. But there's this easier way I found. Guess who it is? It's called the Raan. The Raan, maybe not all the time, but very often, likes to bring when the Rambam argues on his teacher's teacher, the Rif. Okay? So the Raan is already basically explaining the differences between the Rif and the Rambam, sometimes trying to bring them closer, showing you exactly like what the Rambam might not be arguing with the Rif, he might be interpreting the Rif. Or, alternatively, the Rambam, especially when the Rif doesn't say anything, will say something else. So that's another mahalach to understanding the Rambam, is simply to learn the and see how he differs from the Rambam, or how the Rambam, and who's the conduit to that? Who's the best way, methodology? The Rambam. So that's one right off the bat what the Rambam does. This one of the benefits of the Brisker Derech is it really helps with understanding the Rambam, the Mishnah Torah. You're asking either you're a genius or you're a Navi. Dafka not. Well, you're a smart guy. So basically what you're saying is, why wouldn't the Brisker Derech, and they say that, I don't know who I heard this in the name of, I'd like to quote them. I don't know who it was, but I heard one of I think it was a YU Rosh Hashiva, I don't remember which one, who said that the Rabbi Soloveitchik, didn't like the Raan. Now, what's the crime of the Raan? Guess what the crime of the Raan was? Because what, he didn't think the Raan knew what he was talking about? The crime of the Raan was that he was too close to the Brisker Derech. In other words, he felt that being familiar with the Raan would kind of undermine the hischadshus of Brisk. It would show you that Brisk is very nice, but the Raan is just as good, or it's also very good. So what you would think would be a natural shidduch, it's almost like, who's the guy you don't like? The guy who's like you. It's like, if he's like me, who am I? It's an identity issue. It's like if a guy's not like me, I like him because you are you, I am I. There's no confusing the two of us. So you ask a brilliant question, and the answer is dafka because they're so close. The question is, what's the need for Brisk? The answer is, obviously Brisk does certain things that even the Rambam doesn't do, but it's a good intuitive understanding of that they're so similar. We would think they would complement each other, and yet there's this reluctance. He likes the Rambam because the Rambam is almost like, what's the word? A Rorschach? How do you say the ink blot? What's that called again? A Rorschach. Because the Rambam doesn't give his reasoning most of the time, almost all the time. So you get to add it in. The Raan gives his reason, so you don't have the freedom of making up a story of what the Raan saying. You have only limited freedom, Okay, good. Some good observations already coming. So that's the Hakdama to who the Raan is. The other person I picked, and I don't want, because last time I picked this, it was the Rif and the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe. I don't think I ever got to the Alter Rebbe. Okay, so today it's the Raan and the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch Harav. Now, I have a theory that the Shulchan Aruch Harav is is like equally foundational. There's like this myth. I say myth, I shouldn't use the word myth. There's this understanding that the Vilna Gaon somehow had this great Masorah that he gave over to Reb Chaim of Volozhin, that he gave over to the Yeshiva of Volozhin, and certain, when you want to talk about like even the Bali Musar who decidedly broke from the Derech of Volozhin, but they'll say that the greatness of this of the Alter of Navardik is that he was a student of was the Alter of Navardik a student of Rishel Salanter, or was that the Alter of Slobodka? I was a student of the Alter of Yisrael Salanter, and Yisrael Salanter, something of that effect. Yisrael Salanter was a student of Zundel of Salant, who was a Talmud at Volozhin, of Reb Chaim Volozhin, who was a Talmud of the Vilna Gaon, as if to say that when you go to the yeshiva, this particular yeshiva, you have a Masorah that goes back to the Vilna Gaon. That's like going back to Har Sinai. Well, arguably, you could say the same thing about the Alter Rebbe. Who was the Alter Rebbe? He was the combination of Lithuanian scholarship and Hasidism, to the extent where the Maggid of Mizrich charged him with writing an updated version of the Shulchan Aruch. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. But really what the Shulchan Aruch is a little way of learning Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't give you the reason. Did he know the reason? Absolutely. He has a very elaborate, extensive version called the Beis Yosef, where that's, if you really want to learn, if you have all the time in the world, if you want to never go into the office, you could learn the Beis Yosef. I have to go into the office. But the Shulchan Aruch isn't interesting enough to me because it doesn't give the reason. So the Alter Rebbe, beyond just updating the Shulchan Aruch, started giving some of the reasons, the Svaros, the Rishonim, the Achronim, being Machriya between different Achronim usually, especially if it was after the Shulchan Aruch. And if anything, that has a Masorah. You could see the Maramakamis of where he got it from. He wasn't taking from Kabbalah, the Alter Rebbe. Now you could say, what do you mean? Would he not know Kabbalah? You can Google search. He had many great teachers. But the Maggid. But he was already a big Talmud Chacham. By the time he got to, he was a huge. You have to understand, these people were on another level. They're just on another level. But their world was saturated with Talmidei Chachamim. Right? His father was a Talmud Chacham, and he learned by this rabbi and that rabbi. But the main learning, I'm going to say, is with Svarim. You get to a certain thing, and you sit over. Which, by the way, the real Masorah became the Masorah. It's not like the time of Alfasi, where your Masorah. No, your Masorah was, even by the time Rashi came around, there was a new Masorah that was happening. Of course, you also had a teacher, but you had manuscripts, and then eventually you had Svarim, and then you had libraries. It was if you talk about it from a kind of historical perspective, access to different Svarim. He must have had an amazing library. He must have had amazing access. So had some money in the family. I don't know this story. I'm not gonna pretend like I know, but there must be, because you could just see. You just read what he knows. He's not a Navi. He's not. Even if he is a Navi, he's not using any Nevuah. He doesn't want to be accused of Torah Lo B'Shemaimim. He doesn't want to be accused of using Rocha Kodesh. In that, he was similar to the Vilna Gaon in his halachic outlook, is that he's not using any tricks to get to what the halacha is. It's all going to be according to the Piskei halacha, according to the tradition of how we pass in a halacha. And there's a Masorah for that. Okay. Yes, absolutely, but not in his. He basically says that there's a reason why when you learn Gemara and Halacha and you learn Kabbalah, they're like separate. Why are they separate? He basically asks. I read into one of his Maimarim that he asked the question. I think it might be in Parsha Shemos of Era and Torah. He asked, like, why is it that there's Nigla and Nistar? Why can't it be the same thing, the revealed and the concealed? And he basically says an amazing answer. He says, that's Gullus. That's Gullus. So he knew it was there, and he respected that. He knew that until Mashiach is coming, there's going to be a Shulchan Aruch and there's going to be Maimarim. There's going to be a Gemara, there's going to be a Zohar. They're going to be two different. You're going to have one bookshelf and another bookshelf. Okay, you could say, when is Mashiach coming? Chabad, when is Mashiach coming for this, to answer this question? It's a very good question. It's, Yeah. When are we gonna put them back together? When are we gonna put them back together? High expectations here.
That Shulchan Aruch to Jewish people, Chabad had made that something.
Say it again.
No, about like
is the Shulchan Aruch of Rabbi Yosef Karo for these, or is the Alter Rebbe?
About Sukkot, and the Alter Rebbe said he's speaking to Sukkot. They have the whole lot of not.
Yeah. I don't want to get sidetracked. That's something else. Okay. So here's what I want to do. I wrote down 25 things. Like 18 of them are very simple, because I wanted to give you some like halachic. I wanted you to walk away with a couple halachic observations that are very simple that you can do, and a couple like things that you may or may not have known. And then, so what I did is like this. I wrote out 7 things in the Raan. And then to check them and to see what the Alter Rebbe agrees or disagrees or is vague. Okay? So, and then I wrote like 19 little things. I don't know that we'll have to do all 19. It's not relevant. It's just to help me. So if we look at the Raan, the Raan right away in a very similar way to the Brisker way, and this is again Lomdus, ask the question of what exactly is getting rid of Chametz? How do we define getting rid of Chametz? And in fact, you'll see right away, it's the first Rashi. Rashi says in the beginning of Pesachim that Orla Arba Asar, Botan Chametz L'Arhaner, the night of the 14th, we check Chametz. What does Rashi say? Shalom? Anybody? Thank you, David. That you shouldn't violate, thank you, Bernie, you shouldn't violate the lavin of Balyura Bayimatza possessing Chametz. Comes Tosfos and says, what is he talking about? We know that Habodik Shiyavato, that even though you check for the Chametz, you need to do Bittul. And Tosfos gives 2 other reasons. Maybe you're going to come to eat it, or maybe you're going to want it. Maybe what was the other reason? Maybe you'll want it if you see it. Okay. And then there's another interesting Rashi and Tosfos and Abdallah, where Rashi seems to switch roles sometimes. Rashi and Tosfos, it says, "What is taviru? What is the meaning of tashbisu?" Rashi says the meaning of tashbisu is that you should be mevatel, you should nullify the chametz, get rid of it in your heart. And Tosfos says that can't be. Instead, he says it could mean hefker, but it can't mean just this bittul belief. He doesn't go for that. But Rashi already established that the reason that you have to look for chametz and physically get rid of it, not just to be mevatel it in your heart. So that's the first question. So the Raan basically says the following to answer those questions and many other questions. He says the truth is you have to say This is if you want to follow along, this is the first page. Raan starts with Aleph, Amud Aleph, unlike the Gemara. And good. Yeah, Safaria has it. So this is the Raan in Aleph, Amud Aleph, Sofim, and he says, I saw many confusing things in this world of the Bedika and the Bittul, so I found it necessary to explain. That's the third Raan. And then he explains, look, the verse that says, on the first day you should get rid of the Sa'ar, the leaven from your home. And the Gemara says that by nullifying it, that alone is enough, because it says the word tashbisu and not tibaru. It's like a lesser level of getting rid of it, or instead of saying tibaru or tisrofu, to burn it, which is what it does say by an idol. So that's how Rashi explains it, and get rid of it in your heart. And we were explaining before in the Ishbitzer Derech that if the Sa'ar should be Isa, is the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is in you, but you could say, I'm not interested in what it's offering. Like the Yetzer Hara, think of it as a menu. A waiter comes to you and it has, here are these items. What would you like, sir? And you say, I'll just have water. I'm not interested in what the menu has to offer. I'll have the kosher section, right? So according to Rashi, you don't have to buy into the Yetzer Hara. You could just say, I'm not interested. And then, it sounds better. By the way, it's interesting because a lot of us have that when it comes to murder. Say, I don't like the guy. I'm not going to murder him, right? But other Yetzer Hara is like, I can't help myself. That I'm going to do. So we all know plenty of Yetzer Haras that we're able to say, I'm going to pass, right? But there are other Yetzer Haras who are like, I can't control myself. I can't say no, right? So the goal, the objective is when you can move something from I can't say no to I can say no. That's a level of self-mastery that we're looking for. Not easy, but that's the goal. Okay. Anyway, so he makes a whole chiluk that basically, without getting into all the details, that if it's before the time of midday of Erev Pesach, so then bittul is enough. It's about your relationship. You just say, I don't want it. It's not yours. Once midday comes in, then it's about the chametz is yours, even if you don't want it. You can't get rid of it. It's like something. It's like the same person. It's like the story in yeshiva when you're in like fourth grade. They tell you about the Yetzer Hara. First, the Yetzer Hara just waves them across the street. So you say, what does it hurt to wave back? So you wave back. Then the next day it comes across the street and say, hey, how's it going? You're like, hey, how's it going? Right? Then the next day it says, what are you up to? You tell them what you have to. The fourth day it says, let's do something together. The fifth day you're robbing a bank together. You're in the getaway car. You understand? You can't get away anymore from the Yetzer Hara. You could have, if you didn't say hi back, you could have gotten away. If you said hi back, but the second day it's a little harder to get away. I said, look, I can't talk right now. By the fifth day, you're in the getaway car. So that's what it means. By the time the Zman HaIsser is Chal, then you have to get rid of it. Then you have to physically destroy it somehow. Okay. So that's number one, and so on. Number two is really a continuation of that. It's really the time. The bittul or the beer, thank you, Howard, is about the time, like we just said. Number three is he introduces a little historical element, that it could be that really when the Mishnah, Orla Arba Aser, was said, the idea that Habodet Tzarech Sheyavatel, the guy who looks for the chametz, also needs to do bittul, wasn't around. Who is the Bala Memra? Who is even though we don't usually believe in history, but what I mean to say is we believe that Avraham Avinu, what is the Medrash saying that Avraham Avinu was Mekayim Erev Tafshon. What does that really mean? We don't believe in history. It's really what it means. That's all it means. Maybe it also means some other things. So that's really what essentially it means. So what's it trying to say? It's saying when a historian tries to tell you this thing happened in this time, you say, I'm sorry, I don't believe in history. Really? How would he know? Historically, Erev Tashon didn't exist yet. It would be thousands of years till they came up with Erev Tashon. How is he going to do a mitzvah that doesn't exist? We know it's not in the Torah. The rabbis made it at some point. So how would he know about it unless we don't believe in history? Or we believe that somehow magically they all knew every Ma'amar Chazal. You know, even when we're acknowledging that it's not the pirush on what the pasuk means. This is deraisa. No. It means we don't really believe in history. There's a couple people who attempt to push back a little bit on that. The Rambam is one of them. You'll notice the Rambam pushing back a little bit because it's just ridiculous. He doesn't like ideas that don't make any sense. I don't know why. I don't know what's wrong with the Rambam. That doesn't make any sense. I'm like, and everything else makes sense to him. He apparently figured out how to make everything make sense. So the Ram is another guy. He says this Mara Dikasidish, which is maybe the Mishnah didn't know about the Amara of Yehuda Amarav, who was an Amara, who would later say that Habaydik Tzarech Yuvato. The Mishnah didn't know it. The whoever was the author of the Mishnah didn't know that, which is very radical for somebody like the Ram to even suggest that. Okay, that's point number 3. Number 4, he doesn't say definitely not. He says it's possible. He mentions that some Tanaim held that Bir Chametz is burning, like Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Akiva. Number 5 is why isn't bittul enough? He gives 2 reasons. One is that it's about the person's heart, what they really feel, and people's heart are different. Like imagine somebody owns $1 million worth of chametz. Are you saying they really mean it when they say it's not mine? Is that true for them and their heart? And it's interesting. Usually we say Judaism doesn't believe in a sin of the heart, like Christianity, but bittul is all about the heart. That's our sin of the heart of feeling attachment to chametz. So we don't know if we trust people. A, and B, it's there. You might eat it. And I want to add into that number. Yeah. To say bittul. Well, that's the whole question about whether you have to say the bittul or just feel the bittul. Yeah. Let's see. So you're saying you need to say something. You need to do something. Maybe you need the action of getting rid of the comments. Yeah. So the number 6 is the Raan and why the rabbis need why they have to say why do we believe if a woman says she did bedika. Let's say you ask your wife, did you check for chametz in this room? And she says yes. Do you believe her? Yes. And the Gemara says, why do you believe her? I says, because it's only rabbinic. The Rishonim said, what are you talking about? We believe all the time women in biblical mitzvahs. It's not true. So the answer that the Raan gives is because it's very hard to do bedika. Maybe the women they lied. They think they don't take it as seriously as you. Today they say don't believe the man. If the man says, I checked, the woman is right for not really believing. He's checking. Now it's completely reversed. We don't really trust men when it comes to bedika. It's 100% reversed. So I'm gonna suggest that the Alter Rebbe doesn't like that, doesn't agree with that. Up until now, the Alter Rebbe, with maybe the exception of number 3, where he doesn't seem to mention it, is on the same page. I mentioned all of these things because the Alter Rebbe likes the Raan. He's going to quote it a few hundred years later. And this thing, he purposefully neglects. He doesn't really tell us this. He tells us some other thing. Okay.
That's the Alter Rebbe.
The Raan says, really, usually we don't need a specific reason to believe women. We believe them. It's just that because it's such a hard mitzvah, that's why the rabbis say, oh, it's a rabbinic. Because it's otherwise I might think it's a hard mitzvah. They don't want to really do all the work. Number 7 is there's a diuk that the Reuven makes on Orla Arba'asar, the night of the 14th. The word is light, is that it should be right when Pesach Chachavim comes in. Immediately, which is a very important diuk that the Alter Rebbe will use as well. And now I want to quickly use the Alter Rebbe. I've got the first thing, the Alter Rebbe, is in the customs of the days of Nissan, he tracks the evolution of the minhag of 30 days before the Chag. And what he says is a few wonderful things. So he says, interestingly enough, that originally it was a minhag of the Chachamim, or he says A Takkana. Takkana is stronger than a minhag. Institution of the sages in the time of the temple. The reason why they had it is because 2 of the 3 holidays, Sukkot and Pesach, Shavuos not as much, they had special karbanot that they actually Shavuos as well. I'm sorry, my mistake. They had numerous karbanot, the Shamei Simcha, Shamei Chagiga, that they would have to bring. Pesach, he doesn't mention Karban Pesach, which is interesting. But because they had to bring karbanot, they had to make sure that they could select them and that they weren't a balmum. And that's why you would teach 30 days before the laws in regards to the karbanot of each of these different chagim. And then once we didn't have the Beis Hamikdash, the rabbis kept the institution in place for another reason, that Pesach and Sukkot have all of these particular laws. Shavuos don't have any particular laws to Shavuos. It's just a yontif like the other 2. So the 2 of the 3, you keep the 30 days to learn the particular laws. Interestingly enough, he says, but that's for a student and a teacher. What about everyone else? What he calls Hamon Am, I think. Doesn't use the word Amar. It's Hamon, means the people in general. He says they have the Shabbos before. Now, I bet you didn't know this. Shabbos Hagadol, that you heard of. That's when you give the drasha, Shabbos before Pesach. What about Sukkot? Shabbos Shuvah. You know what the Shabbos Shuvah drasha was really about? Hilchos Sukkah, Hilchos Lulav Aspirin. That's what it is. No one, did any of you know that? Right? But that's what it is. Now, what happened? What changed? How come it came a Shabbos Shuvah drasha? There's nothing to do with. Nobody mentions Sukkot. I think I'm going to mention. So I'm going to go back and mention Sukkot. Okay, because what happened is everyone wrote Svarim, and we have a Shulchan Rambam, Mishator, we have a Tur, we have a Beis Yosef, a Shulchan Aruch, a Maggid Mishnah, a Magen Avraham, the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, Aruch HaShulchan, the Mishnah Berurah, and everybody else has written something on Halacha. So read the Halachas. That's what he says. So now you read the Halachas. So that's probably what happened. The Shabbos Shuvah got. Nobody even knows that you're really supposed to be talking about the laws of Sukkot, because just like Shabbos Hagadol, we talk about some nice spiritual thing, even though he says it's not a good idea to do that, but then he recognizes that because the reality is we have halacha svarim, the emphasis is going to become whatever it is today. Okay, that's just an aside, kind of curiosity. Question is, why would there be a difference between a Torah scholar, a Talmud Chacham, or a student of Torah, and a Hamon? Like, if this is a Takkana, isn't the Takkana equal? So it has to be that the Alter Rebbe is understanding the nature of Takkanot and the evolution of Takkanot. It was made for one thing. It changed. It changed also for different people, for different things. He's basically documenting some evolution of Takkana to a minhag and how it evolves. So does that mean he believes in the evolution of halacha? Absolutely not. He believes that the halacha was probably didn't need to be there unless we felt it was necessary once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. In other words, anytime we carry something over from an earlier time, it's allowed to change if the reason it was given was 100% clear. This is because we're going to bring a carbon. Well, that means if you're not going to bring a carbon, you don't need to do it at all. If you want to continue it, you can continue it on your terms for whatever the reason is. So that's just a little bit. That's 1, 2, 3, and 4. We just covered those 4. Number 5 is a 30-day tax. You get stuck up for most chitin. I'm just saying that. That's not a chiddush. That's just like, advertisement that's coming. Okay, number 6 is you don't say tachlin in Nissan. Just it make you happy. No. Or some people never say it year long, but he doesn't say that. People are asking me, did Shlomo not say tachlin on a yard site? So I don't think he said tachlin. Period. No, I don't. There's always a yard site. There's always a yard site. Like the Royhans, they have a yard site book. It's every day's a yard site. There's a book like that. Yeah. Number 7, Shabbos Agalo should have been the 10th of Nisan, because that's when the miracle of when they took the Paschal offering and there was a rebellion. What's the word? The firstborn had a civil war. There's a beautiful teaching about that the Yeshua and the Geula comes when there's a crack within the mentality or the way of thinking of Mitzrayim itself. Mitzrayim has to realize that it itself is false for it to crumble. By the way, Rabbi Soloveitchik is a similar teaching that what was all of the interactions between Moshe Rabbeinu and Pharaoh, he was really teaching Pharaoh to accept the falsehood of his whole philosophy so that he would be able to let go of his enslavement of Bnei Israel. Okay. So number 8 is another little custom that we say Avadim Hayinu on Shabbos between Mincha and Ma'ariv. And number 9 is a little more of the Lomdus. Now we're getting to the Lomdus. That was just like, because that was the Ikar Nes. That because of what we just said before, that miracles started happening from then, because there was already a civil war. And the civil war was the beginning of the Geula. Between the firstborn and the others. So now we get into more of the Lomdus now, 9, 10, 11, which is where the Bir Chametz. What is Bir Chametz? So on the one hand, he seems to say that the Bir Chametz really is to get rid of the Chametz. But then he qualifies that. He says that's only if it's already after midday. But if it's before midday, then getting rid of chametz is not about physically getting rid of it, but it's about doing bittul. And here I'm going to suggest that this is the Alter Rebbe's version of the theory of relativity. Okay, now what is that to the theory of relativity? There's a famous Minchas Chinuch. And Minchas Chinuch also is this great thinker, great Lomdus, great Chakiris. And he asks a question: what's one of the differences between positive mitzvah and a negative mitzvah? The negative mitzvah is simply I don't do the thing and I get the star. The positive mitzvah is I have to do the thing to fulfill the mitzvah. So if there's a positive mitzvah, and seemingly there is, of getting rid of the chametz on the midday of Erev Pesach, so we should have we should actively go out and make sure we have chametz to get rid and actively get rid of it, and then we should wait to that time. And he has a whole very strong question: why don't we do this when we find? So maybe it's not. Maybe it's that we shouldn't have it. And the positive mitzvah, even though it's framed in the positive, but it's subservient to the negative of just not having it. That's the chakira. Here's what the Alter Rebbe says. The Alter Rebbe says that it's relative to what time. The mitzvah changes with the time. So timing is everything. Now, what's the relationship between time and space in Einstein's theory of relativity? The theory is that because of gravity, there could be a bend in space, and that affects the travel of time, because time travels through space. So if the time if the space is bent, so then the timing will also be affected by that, right? So what does that mean? I don't really think that Alter Rebbe was literally talking about the theory of gravity. I don't really think that. I'm using it as an illustration, but there is something that they have in common. What does that mean? It means the Iker time, the main time when you can't have Chametz, if you have Chametz, you got to destroy it. Because that's how harmful it is. You got to physically get rid of it. Otherwise, it's almost like in Brisker terminology, at that moment, it takes on the Isser Chafsa. It becomes objectively forbidden, objectively, it can't be in the world. It's not just your relationship, it just can't be there. And in effect, you can't, the Alter Rebbe basically documents that there's no way to get rid of it. Isn't that a crazy thing? Doesn't matter what you do. You could put it out in the street. You could give it to somebody else. It's still yours. Because the Gemara says a strange thing that if once Pesach starts, you have to destroy. Even if you find it on Pesach itself, you put a garbage pail or something on top of it to hide it, and then as soon as it's Chol, you burn it. And I'm thinking, why can't you just, it's yontif, you can carry it and put it in the street. The Gemara doesn't say that. You hear the question? Never bothered you to hear this question? Like it's right now you have Chametz, Pesach. Why do you have to go out of your way to burn it? So you're saying it's maybe the Rabbanan, that they were masakin. No, the Alter Rebbe says no, it's not a Takkana. It is the only way to get rid of it is to destroy it, because otherwise it's yours. Yeah, we're talking about if you didn't do bittul. So you didn't do bittul. That's the scenario. You didn't do bittul. So why can't you just say do hefker? Because you can't. Because it's not about whether you don't want it. It's the Torah made it yours. So that's okay. I'm going to explain to you. Oh, you're going to like this. Sometimes we have a Yetzer Hara, and they say, well, thank you very much, God, for this Yetzer Hara. I'm going to give it back to you. I'm not interested in it. Guess what? The Torah made it yours. I can't. There's nothing I can do to get rid of it. I can't. I can put it on the street. It's almost like a scary cartoon, where you get rid of the thing, and it's just there. It's back in your house. It doesn't. You throw it off the cliff. It's back in your house. You put it on an airplane. It's back in your house. It doesn't matter what you do. And that's the theory of relativity. That at some point the Zmana Isser came. It's yours. It doesn't matter if you don't want it. It doesn't matter. You could throw it and you have to explode it. You have to literally get rid of it, that it doesn't exist, or crumble it into the ocean at that point. There's no other way, because the Torah made it as if it's yours. It's not you that makes it yours. It's out of your control. It's a very powerful. Yeah, you can still do streifa. Yeah, you can still do streifa. Sure. And on that, there's a machlokus in the Gemara. And is it enough to destroy it, crumble it, throw it in the Hudson? And that's the halacha, and Alter Rebbe paskins like that. He says, but kvar nogu Yisrael, the minig is to be machmer, to go like the other shita, which is to burn it. Meaning, if you understand the science and the psychology of something like a trauma or something that we have in us, that at a certain point it becomes activated, it's nice to say, I want to walk away with it. So, there's an earlier point before it becomes active. You walk away. It's not yours yet. It's like the Yetzer Hara across the street. You see it, you wave, or don't. Better not to wave. I don't want to. You want to talk? I don't want to talk. Can I come in to see you? No, don't come in to see me. I think it's going to come back to haunt you. That's why you have to break it up. No, Dola. Chatas, you eat some part of it. The Ola, you completely burn. Yeah. Why do you completely burn it? there's some powerful thing of saying it's all yours. I can't. None of this for me. No for the Kohen. No for the Chatas. The Kohen meets is some part of it. Yeah.
Or the ocean. It's something material. Never fully got rid of.
So that's part of the chakira of whether we compare it to avodah zara or like where you need a sreifa. There's like you got to get rid of you got to mamish get rid of it, or I think it's actually nosar, which you have to burn, and that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. You burn it. We learned it out from a pasuk. It's like either say a shava, where it's learned out from nosar according to him that you have to burn it, and what else is like that? Something like avodah zarah is like that. In other words, how deep? It's so fascinating that something like chametz, which is completely kosher the rest of the year, once Pesach starts, one opinion is saying it's not only is it a chiyuv kares on the night of, not the midway through the day. It's so violently forbidden that you have to destroy it through fire, and that's the chakira. That's the chakira. How do you do fire in tshuva? What fire represents is when there's two things about a fire. The one thing is when you put let's say a carbon on the fire of the altar, it means that whatever energy the animal had for the animalistic tendency that animals have is now burnt. It means you took all of that energy away and redirected it to fire to God, which means you have to find an outlet. This is based on the Arizal's interpretation of how do you do tshuva. The only way is if you take the same strength of the sin, because the sin is like in a Freudian way, like activating a lower part of the self. Like there's a part of yourself in your unconscious that has what we call pleasure. Like it's thinking of pleasure that you wouldn't even think about in your right mind, but that part of your hidden unconscious and thinking about the pleasure. And the only way to fix it is to find an equivalent part of your divine soul and activate that. First of all, cut off your relationship with that negative action of finding that pleasure, that illicit pleasure, and then redirect it. And the only way it's called tshuva miyava, but the way that the Ari explains it is that if you don't act it, he said that the source of most sins is not just simply a sin, it's a fail to ignite that passion in a davar shebekdusha. You will activate one or the other parts of yourself, either the unholy or the holy. So, well, it means that, okay, so tshuva miyava is a temporary, it's a stopgap measure. Tshuva miyava is in the meantime. I have to stop something. So you could, yeah.
You never get rid of it.
Or it's the easiest thing to get rid of. It just depends when. That's why I like the theory of relativity, is that it changes.
Outside and inside. The Torah is not Spinoza. That is all, that is all within us, and that's the whole reality, right? A mental reality, and therefore also it exists as the God, and it exists in reality too. An objective, and that's the that is a force even outside of you that's called the sidrach, and it's a negative sign. And in the end, it's immersion. So we have the responsibility to deal with something outside of the Sahara, outside of us as well. Mm-hmm. It's a very deep understanding of the world, of a worldview. It's not like a pantheism, where it's just one reality. It's all the universe, right? And you're it. It's all inside of you. But that's not the case. Is that we have to see things as there's something outside of us as well. called the Sidra. Can't go around thinking, oh,
Outside and inside. Yeah, it's all relative. Yeah. And it's interesting because we all know in Kabbalah there's something called the Yechida that's like outside of you, but there's also in Klippa outside of you. That's what the difference is. Let's say the Gemara says it's all one, but they mean it's different stages of the same thing of Klipot. The Yitzhahara, the Malchamaves, meaning they start as maybe one's internal psychology, the other one is like more of a Jungian archetype, and the other one is like a dark force in I don't know what. They're all play off each other. Any other questions, comments, David? You have a devil in the middle of the earth? Yeah, the Zohar has a lot of stuff features under the ground. You remember the Zohar that says it has all these like fantastic stories, and it says don't say that they're not true. It's like they're true. The Gemara is more wild than the Zohar. David, you learned the Gemara lately? How crazy the things they say over there in the Agadah? All the time. Right now the Daf Yomi is normal. Yeah. They just skip those parts. Just skip the Agadah. The Daf Yomi is you don't understand anything. So what's the difference? Yeah. Hey, what do you say? You like the Raan? You're going to become a chassid of the Raan? Yeah. What's nice about the riff and the Raan is like it looks like you're looking at a Gemara Rashi Tosos, right? The same layout of the page. It's very geschmack, by the way. It's a very nice add-on to learn. Is to learn the riff and the Raan. It's just like it's just really nice. Yeah. You need a little time, but you guys are going to retire at some point. Bernie's already retired. Start planning your retirement. The retirement plan, maybe the money may or may not be there, but the Raan is there. So, the Raan. Start with the Raan. You have a dog? Yeah. Dogs in Manhattan probably cost like $70 a day to feed and bathe and walk your dog. Uh, uh, Well, if the dog has bad breath, it's amazing. Baruch Hashem. By treatment. Yeah.
That's therapy. All the psychotherapy.
Talk therapy, bark therapy, touch therapy. You know who's never going to be out of a job? A dog therapist. It doesn't help. It's not about the dog. It's about the owner, right? Somebody has to know how to translate it.
Luckily, I was an exponential mind that the dog walker wanted the dog.
Gladly.
Back. No, try to look at
The West Side, instead of talking about Shalom, is what we talk about.